due to the timing, because of timing. And that's perfectly fine. That's perfectly fine to condense. Now, in the 90s, we know, I mean, if we are going to talk about the theories and the translation theories, in the 60s being linguistic, moving up to Steiner and hermeneutics, and then moving down to culture and translation, Susan Bassnett and Snell Hornby in 1988, and then moving to Lefebvre, or how they pronounce it in French, Lefebvre, in 1991, with Suzanne Bassnett, and they talk about the culture turn, and then moving on to the 2000 and 2010 ideology and translation, and Mona Baker, and she talks about the narrative theory, which was as late as 2007, if my memory doesn't fail me here. Now, all of these are linked together. I mean, if we go to Lefebvre and also patronage, what are we subtitling if we are talking about Lefebvre and subtitling? Who is the patronage element here? It's very similar to the publisher. Who is my publisher? The publisher will not publish anything. They need to publish certain things. So there is an influence by publishers, and there is influence by the institution, by a political group, by a religious group. All of these are linked to subtitling a particular audiovisual material. And just a good example of this is in, I can't remember now the exact date, but I've written it in one of my papers about a bishop called Williams. Now, this bishop was talking about the Holocaust and that. Even the choice between subtitling and dubbing can be politicized. Because if you subtitle, and this is what happened actually in real fact for Al Jazeera at the time, that is in 2006, 2007, is that I asked the producer, I said, which one do you want? Do you want it to be dubbed so that we can prepare a dubbed version and we can voice over this bishop, who is Bishop of England, I think, Archbishop, and whether to dub that piece or to subtitle it. And of course, he resorted to subtitling. He says, because we want to hear the original, because everybody needs to hear the original, especially as he's saying, there aren't many people who have been involved in the Holocaust as victims. So you see, this is translation and politics. Which reminds me of Schaffner, Christina Schaffner, for example. You can also talk about contextualization as well. And then you go back, you go forward to 2015 and 2018 for quality assessment, and Julian House and Nord, Christine Nord. So you see, this is really part of, not subtitling, it's actually part of translation itself. Though there are some constraints which we know about in terms of you need to read this very quickly, the reading speed needs to be very fast. There are lots of studies regarding, for example, eye movement, monitoring the eye movement of the viewers to see how they can look at the picture, the image and the subtitle at the bottom and be able to follow the film, not only just to read the text from the bottom and not worry what the text, what the film is saying, what the image is saying, what the sound is saying. And that is also proof of what they are saying about the combination, the overlapping of image and sound and text. So you see all of these combined, and to just say the technical aspects with regards to reading speed, with regards to color, obviously if it's black and white, you use drop shadow for the letters, so the letters can appear clearly on screen because there's a black and white film. You need to make it stand out. So I mean, there is a little bit of element of that, yes. The positioning as well is another element, yes. I mean, that is why positioning was a little bit of a problem at one stage, because when we were doing dubbing, not dubbing, when we were subtitling a DVD of a film, it used to be subtitled by 34 languages. So the positioning was important, because the Chinese and the Japanese, they use it upside down from the sides of the screen and not at the bottom of the screen. And we have the problem of left aligned and right aligned, and that is also because of the English or the Latin-based languages. They tend to start from one alignment, the left or the right, for Arabic or English. So that is really, yes, it is very little things here and there, but these are not really the massive, most important element in subtitling or in AVT in general, whether you want to talk about subtitling in particular or in general. They are not. Duration is important as well, because in dubbing, it's one line requires 5 seconds to read, for example, whereas in 5 seconds you can do 2 subtitles. You can read 2 subtitles in 5 seconds. And what's the minimum duration for a subtitle is 1.02 frames, because frames means pictures, plus the 1 second, and so on. But these are only technical elements. Where do I cut? Where do I split the line? Of course, this is like in interpreting, simultaneous interpreting. And you know that in simultaneous interpreting, if you are exposed to this kind of thing, and I have been doing live interpreting for Al Jazeera for 5 years at one time, after 2004, 5. Now, in simultaneous interpreting, you do what's called a segmentation. And in segmentation, you segment the text where it can be a phrase, but it has to be a full phrase in each line in the subtitle, in one subtitle. And each line should have a phrase which is full. You can't just have the preposition at the end, and then the second line is the rest of the prepositional phrase or prepositional constituent. Now, this is really, these are important, but not as important as the content. This is it's much more important and needs to be considered. I really don't know. I mean, if you are going to talk about still about traditional theories in translation studies like Venuti and domestication and foreignizing, whether to translate and put a little bit of paratext meaning like footnotes and things like that, which you cannot do in subtitling, obviously, but you can do that in printed translation. You can't do that in dubbing either. So this is the paratext is an issue with regards to subtitling. So paratextuality, whether it is peri-text, i.e. Around the text, information about the text, like a preface, the title of the film, for example, how you translate it, and the cover of the book, if it's a book, and an introduction by the translator. Whereas the epi-text, of course, is related to an interview with the translator, or interview or conversation with them, or a review by someone about quality of the end product, i.e. the TT. So I don't know, I mean, there's also drama. I mean, I have written recently a co-authored with another, it's a forthcoming paper with Dr. or Professor Arig from Helwan University about the link which I have noticed between, or we have noticed, between drama texts, how to translate theater texts, and audiovisual translation, because there is similar setting, for example, the setting for the drama, for example, we were talking about Julius Caesar, and that in each act you will have also information about the situation of that text and who is producing the text and who is receiving the text. And because it's a dialogue, or even if it's a monologue, still you have the text producer. I'm just going back text to the Maxims and the conversation, and subtitling as a communication act, where you have this kind of performable text, readable text. Comprehensible text is also extremely important by the receiver. So comprehensibility is extremely important by the viewer. And that is also another element which you need to be aware of, is the audience design, the design of the audience. Who are my audience? If I am subtitling, for example, if we're talking about subtitling or dubbing for that matter, the choice of words play an extremely important part in the subtitling of that audiovisual material. If it's a video for a hospital, for example, corporate video. Corporate video means videos by private entities or companies. The video itself, for example, is addressing pregnant women. Then I have to know that I'm not addressing here the medical staff. I'm not addressing doctors and nurses. I'm addressing the maybe housewives who may not know a lot about the technical words or terminology. So I'm not going to use very difficult words for them, i.e. medical terminology. And I'm not going to use all these morphemes, laryngitis or rhino, laryngitis or whatever. Rhino means the nose, and laryngitis means the throat. So I would say ENT, ear, nose, ear, and throat. So I would choose different kind of wording because this video is targeting this kind of people, this kind of audience who are housewives, may not be quite literate or highly educated. They are not going to be doctors and nurses. But if I am doing a video which is targeting or addressing all the medical staff, doctors and nurses, obviously I'm going to use the most sophisticated words they use, terminology they use. So terminology is nothing to do with subtitling in terms of technical element. It is actually the choice of terms that I have to be aware of. And these terms are extremely important to know them as a subtitler. For example, when I was doing ER or when I was doing Grey's Anatomy series, it's full of two types of text types. So I need to be aware as a subtitler of the two types of texts that I used, text types. You have conversation going on, and you have also using some technical, highly medical words in their own, in the actual body of the text. يعني متن النص, متن النص. So this is really extremely important to be aware that I am actually here in the Grey's Anatomy. I'm talking to everybody here. Whereas if I am preparing a video for the medical staff to know how to use an equipment, for example, medical equipment, or how to do an operation of some sort, then I have to use the highly technical words, the terminology, medical terminology. The same applies to pharmaceutical. I was teaching pharmaceutical translation. So, or even when it comes to petroleum, okay, or engineering, still you have to use the same thing. We have code in math as well. These two. So all of these are highly technical, but I need to understand them. I need to translate them. Of course, this is extremely important. What Danica Seliskovic in Interpreting says, do not interpret what you don't understand. Do not subtitle what you don't understand. If you don't understand something, don't subtitle it. End of story. If you don't know the message, if you don't understand the message, don't subtitle it. And that's at the end of it, you know? And just going back to also about the traditional theories. Well, I forget. I'm trying to remember now. I forgot that point with regards to traditional theories, terminology. I'm trying to remember what my last point is. I've forgotten it because I haven't written any notes. That's the thing about it, and I forgot now what my point is here with regards to that. But basically, oh yes, I remember now. It's pragmatics. Now, I have one student who did implicatures, and this is pragmatics, conversation, and the maxims, and speech acts, you know, locution, elocution, perlocution, whether, and the best examples in films is 007. For example, Casino Royale is a good one. Jackie Chan's films, which I've subtitled some of them, they do actually show that kind of implicatures in not only what is explicitly said, but there is an implied message behind it. Sometimes we need to try to understand that kind of things. Of course, there are double entendre used as well, mostly in 007 films, though old ones. But this double entendre, it's in any language, okay? There are also the taboo language, which requires euphemisms, depending on who is my target audience, and the shocking element in addressing my audience. Now, of course, talking about the audience and the design of the audience, Vermeer in Scopus theory, the purpose of the translation. What is the purpose of it? Now, that reminds me of Tory and what they have pointed out about. They were subtitling some children's movies, children's TV series at one stage. I can't remember now the article and who has written it, but it was about Tory and the poly system theory, where they were translating, and these are Hebrew translators, they were translating some German children literature, okay, from German into Hebrew. And they have decided, I meant by they, the patronage, the people who are controlling, they have the power, they have the factors, the control factors, which Lefebvre talks about. They were controlling it. Let's say they have removed from these children literature when they were translating it, and that's not for subtitling, they removed the parts that are related to Jews. So there is that element of domestication here, okay, the domestication that we know about, where you are taking the author to the reader, as Schleiermacher says in 1813. You know, I mean, so the power, the institution who is actually controlling this element of what you can and cannot say as well in the video itself, and especially if you're translating also religious texts, it has got its own minefields, shall we call them, in that. And then you have to worry about what to mention and what not to mention, and the taboo language as well, and censorship element as well. I think I'm gonna stop here, and maybe I don't know whether I need to carry on. I mean about this, or I would like to hear from you. I mean, I have covered quite in a very snapshot, shall we say, some very, very little, it's a drop in the sea, if you like, about what AVT is and what it is not. And I mean, I remember now what Dr. Baida is saying about the softwares. There are so many softwares that you can choose from, Swift and Spot and Softel and WinCaps. All of them are just very good, and you can purchase them for academic purposes, and that is available in the market as well. I don't know whether I should, I don't know what to, I mean, the thing is that I don't know what you would like me to talk about. I mean, I have just given you a few little things here and there, maybe to tickle your mind. Maybe you can come up with some questions for me. I don't know. I mean, what do you think, Dr. Baida?
Yes, sure. Just a second, Mushtaq. So you allow me first to arrange things.
Sure.
Thank you very much for this illuminating lecture. And I'd like to say that we are all learning, including me, because the field has been very recently introduced to our translation departments. And I think this our department is the first in Iraq to have it. And yes, we are all learning. And I think that we have really benefited from some of the cases you have told us about, and we still have more to ask about. For example, when you just talked about Julian House and North, I thought, I have always been thinking when I read about audiovisual translation or teach, that we should start translation theories from scratch for AVT purposes, because everything is different. The factors are different, the purposes, the audience, the decision making, everything. So the first question is, should we really try to start to build new translation theories for the purpose of AVT, which are completely different from translation theories for written translation or interpretation? This is number one. And number two is about decision making. I think it's the most important thing in doing translations for AVT, because you have first to put the audience in mind, and number two, because you are always in this difficult situation, whether to transfer things as they are in order to educate the audience, because you don't have to present everything that they already know, and whether to try to simplify things for them and go down to their level. This is an eternal debate in the field of translation studies. So could you please tell us something about work experience where you have been through such cases where you translated something and then on a second thought you thought that you could have done something differently? For example, you could have taken other factors into consideration. These are the most very important 2 points for me. If you would like to answer them first and then we go to the students, or should we write down everything first?
No, I mean, I don't mind either way. I could answer these if you want, if you may allow me to do so. Now, with regards to new translation theories, I don't think you need new translation theories. The existing ones can do that. Now, I have read something about as recent as published as 2019 by Venuti, where he talked about instrumentalism and contra-instrumentalism, which he's calling, and that will be interesting for your students to have a look at and read that book by Venuti in 2019. I can't remember the exact title, but it's Contra-Instrumentalism. He was attacking, actually, in the subtitling section in the chapter, one of the well-known scholars, Gottlieb, and Gottlieb, Henrik Gottlieb, that he was very much into the linguistic side of that. He's not dealing with what he called contra-instrumentalism. I think new theories, I don't think you need new theories because it's only the technical side which is an issue. For example, the audience design is still the same. If you are translating for children books, you have to use a certain language used by children. For example, It's So Raven and High School Musical, these are, and Little Einstein, and these are ones that I've done a long time ago. You can see that my audience are known to me. I know that they are going to be the High School Musical. It's not going to be for adults. They're going to be for young viewers. Little Einstein for children learning. That's what's called edutainment, well known in this. So you choose the kind of decision making with regards to the choice of words, which will be simplified, as in the case of, for example, schizophrenia. You wouldn't, they make fun of the word in like Little Einstein first, at the beginning of the episode, and then by the end they say split personality. He says, what? Schizophrenia. Schizophrenia. And they start making a joke about it. So here, Fusam shakhsiyya, and Fisam, what? And here you are doing the same thing in terms of playing on that and choosing the words. Now, when it comes to also decision making here, with regards to other situations, as in the case of another quite sensitive dialogue, shall we say, between two male characters talking to each other and saying one of them to the other something to do with the underwear of another lady standing somewhere not very far from them. Now, that is, it was translated, I subtitled it as is at the time, and one of the editorial control officer, he came to me, he says, look, I mean, do you expect the audience, as you know, which was at the time in 1991-92, he says, do you expect the audience to actually watch this and read this? So he's just made me aware that I shouldn't be foreignizing that much, shall we say, in my approach to translation when it comes to taboo language or taboo text, whether it's taboo text can be political, religious, or sex related. So I have to reconsider, and that is to answer your question on that. Now, about simplification and oversimplification, this is not required to oversimplify, no. And oversimplification, overexplication is not required in any kind of translation unless it is actual, unless it's for children, and unless you have got it's a slow pace kind of video where you have more time. The duration element is allowing you to do that. Usually this is a luxury when there is a speaker who is pausing a lot, trying to think and speak. And that is when you can actually add a little bit more of text just a little bit, not much. So, I mean, that is really relating to what the speed of the speaker is, whether it's in interpreting or even in an audiovisual material that you are watching, or for somebody who is giving a lecture or a conference and he is talking and you are subtitling. There is also what reminds me of this is that in Berlin Conference Film Festival, usually they ask for live subtitling as well, or they want the turnover or turnaround will be very, very high. You have to finish the subtitle film so quickly so that you have to finish it really fast and that reminds me actually when you said about new theories. I mean, translation as a process, translation as a product. We know this very common dichotomy, if you like. As a process, are we talking? You can look at the conditions of the subtitlers or the dubbers, how much they are paid. Are they going to be voicing the actual script themselves, or somebody else is going to do that? What the deadlines are like? What are the conditions, the work conditions? What kind of software they are using? All of these are to the process, not only the decision-making process, but also the process of the actual subtitling itself, and whether it's dubbing. So I would say the process of audiovisual translation. So we do not need to reinvent the wheel here. We need to add to what already exists there in the theories, and the theories are just just as important as learning the technical side. The technical side is just a little bit and not need to be over simplification, definitely not acceptable. Not acceptable in subtitling for children program, even though you simplify, but you don't oversimplify. You don't oversimplify. I hope that I have actually covered your points, Dr. Rega. Any other comments or any other points, comments, remark, question you want to ask? Yes. Anybody wants to ask anything particular about a particular point, or you want me to elaborate on something? Waiting for any kind of, please feel free to ask anything you have in mind. No matter how simple, or it can be just a very simple thing. You might think it's simple, but it may not be, might be of interest to others. So please feel free to ask anything you want or you have in mind about AVT. Indeed, about translation, if you like.
Just a second, please. Do you all hear me? Because I think I lost my mic.
Yes, I can hear you, Professor.
Yes, good, great. Thank you very much, Dr. Professor Khadru. But first, let me welcome the head of our department, Dr. Mahdi Al-Ghazali, who has been trying to join us right from the beginning, but for technical problems, he couldn't join us until just, I think, 20 minutes ago. So welcome him to our session. And
yes, welcome,
yes.
Dr. Mahdi. If you would like to point out about something, you're most welcome. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I want to express my deep gratitude to Dr. Khadru for his nice presentation, although I joined late due to technical problems involved that prevented me from joining from the early beginning of this nice lecture. Concerning the interpretation, I mean, especially simultaneous interpretation.
Yes.
I come across many researches done on anticipation
Yes.
in simultaneous interpretation.
Yes.
And they say that it plays a vital role in this type of translation, which is oral translation. What is your comment concerning anticipation?
I don't think, I mean, anticipation in interpreting is based on the research that the interpreter does before going to the conference to do the interpreting. Through their research, they
because they say,
some
sorry
concepts.
for this interruption,
Sure.
because they say that the simultaneous or consecutive interpreter should have encyclopedic knowledge before he gets involved in this task.
Yeah, no, not encyclopedic knowledge, but you see, in interpreting, I'm sure. And for those who are doing interpreting, they know that it is not really. It's like I see you in the corridor and say, "Excuse me, can you please come and interpret?" And you just come in and jump in and interpret. It's particularly in conferences. Usually in interpreting, you tend to have like 2 or 3 days beforehand to be able to prepare some of the material that you are expecting to be discussed.
Yes.
And while you are preparing, you come across terminology in both languages. And when you do that, you are remembering them in both languages.
Like a translation brief.
It is similar to the yes, it's similar to that, but it's a much bigger scale, because what you do as an interpreter, and that's what they do in the UN and in Brussels. And when I was doing my interpreting, I knew at the time that what the topic is about, what are they going to discuss, roughly speaking, and then I go and read all these articles in both languages, watch what is on the media, TV, radio, in the newspapers, what is on the internet, and so on, in order to have some knowledge, background knowledge about the topic, so that I know the equivalence or the equivalence of all these different terminologies used, because sometimes the terminologies that are used in English are not exactly translated into Arabic and vice versa. So therefore, I go and do that as an interpreter when I know that it is, for example, the conference is about business, for example, or the conference is about the environment, or the conference is about the refugees or politics. The conference is about the UN. The conference is about Libya or whatever. So
banking sector, the banking sector, for instance.
Yeah, I mean, whichever topic it is, you as an interpreter, you prepare yourself beforehand. You appear to be that you are encyclopedic in the way you are conducting yourself, but really it's not the case. It's a matter of how much you prepared beforehand. I remember I did one a couple of years back on blockchain and technical AI, artificial intelligence, and so on. And I went and prepared a lot of terminology there, and I prepared quite a few. I read quite a few articles in both languages. And when I went there, and the speaker is not going to go talk about something that is, let's say, outside this topic, which is what was the topic about, blockchain. So I'm anticipating, this is part of the this helps a lot in the anticipating or anticipation part of what the interpreter is doing. Of course, the anticipation in subtitling is not the same in that, I mean, there are some softwares which they pick up the word, you write only a few words and a few letters, and the word appears on screen straight away immediately for live subtitling. And that's in itself it requires 3-4 people to do it, to do live interpreting. And it's not anticipation as much. Now, anticipation can be based a little bit on collocations. Like, for example, if he's going to say in Arabic, تعددت الأسباب, and he stopped, you know what to expect next. So you anticipate that. You anticipate he's going to talk about, if you are in the UN, you are expecting, for example, a certain resolution, the number of the resolution, what the resolution is about. If it's 2254, you know that's about Lebanon or Syria or whatever. So, this is the kind of knowledge that you need to have to be armed with. You need to have that with you before you go into that. Now, in subtitling, in dubbing, you need to do research the same way you do research for any other translation that you do. When you come across a term, you don't know what it is, DNA, for example, or any other term, in a scientific term, you need to go and search it like any other text that you come across. But the difference, in a way, from interpreting is that the text type is different. The text type can be formal and spoken English mixed together, or legal plus spoken. A good example is what's his name in The Rain Man, for example, the film, where his brother is mentally retarded. So when he was talking to the doctor is telling him some terminology which is used in the medical field. So that is a kind of
I think you mean The Rain Man.
The Rain Man, yes, The Rain Man, and then there is also the
Tom Cruise and Dustin Hoffman.
Tom Cruise, that's it, yes. When he was talking to the lawyer was using his law language, the legal language. So about contracts, about heritage, and so on, inheritance rather. So all of these 2-3 different types of texts are used in this film. So I mean, films can have more than one type. Now, in interpreting, you can have that as well, anticipated to an extent, the 2 different types of text types. I remember I was interpreting for a conference, and there was an imam or somebody religious leader. He was going to speak in the conference. I expected him to do some Quranic verses, that he's going to be doing that. And while I was interpreting, he did actually use some of them. Now, I had to preempt that, and I met him before the conference, paper that he was going to give, and I asked him what are the texts that he's using in the Quranic texts, and he told me, and I went and prepared them beforehand, and I put them next to me for me to be aware of what they are about, and in order to interpret them very quickly, because it's quite a minefield if you want to interpret them correctly. And I have noticed also the audience themselves, when he started to use these Quranic verses, a number of them started to put their headphones on, only when he was talking about these particular verses. So you see this kind of, it's a little bit of anticipation, I could call, which I have managed to expect and anticipate, and did that. But there are other anticipations with regards to the topic itself.
Thank you, Professor Ahmed, for these nice remarks and comments.
Thank you.
And thanks for accepting the invitation.
Thank you very much indeed. I am so honored to hear you, and I'd be more than happy to answer more of any of your questions, whether it's about interpreting or I mean, I'm talking about interpreting. I know anticipation is there's a book about anticipation, simultaneous interpreting, Benjamin.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Khadra, this really sufficient answer, and I think I kept Mushtaq waiting for a long time.
Sure.
So let's have his question. Yes, Mushtaq, go ahead.
This guy.
تفضل مشتاق.
Yes, Mushtaq, we are waiting for your question. Are you there?
Maybe his mic is not on, or maybe he's.
It's on. It's on. I can see
maybe
it.
his audio. Maybe his audio is.
Okay, let's go to Jalil. Jalil, do you hear us?
Yes, yes, doctor.
Yes, Jalil, go ahead.
Yes.
Yes.
Until
thank you.
Until Mushtaq fixes his problem. Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Khadro, for your valuable presentation and information about audiovisual and translation theories. And thank you for this opportunity. So my question is, so you are a specialist in audiovisual. So my question is, what are the recent areas in audiovisual in general and in subtitling in particular that need to be investigated and that can be considered as good or suggested topics for a PhD dissertation? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now, of course, you're talking about research gaps that are, and there are quite a lot of them. I would say, with regard to research gaps, you can go for intralinear magazine or journal, intralinear journal. It's an academic journal published or edited by some scholars in Bologna University in Italy. I remember there is, if I can actually give you the title of something building something or other. Just give me 1 second, and I will try to see if I can find the article that's published. It is about lots of gaps in subtitling for the deaf and hard of hearing. Of course, in terms of gaps or research areas, recent, there are lots of, I mean, for example, eye movement, there's not much going on about that. There's lots about dubbing. There's not much on dubbing into Arabic, whether it's dubbing into, there's multilingualism in films, when you have a film that is consisting more than 2 or 3 languages in the film, with the English being the primary or the main language, and there are 3, 4, 5 languages as well. So multilingualism, biculturalism, this is one area. There is, I mean, it depends on what is your main interest, if it's in subtitling or in dubbing. There is voice-overing. I have recently reviewed a paper on some students, master students, who did voiceovers, and it was, they assessed them for the quality of their translation or for the recordings of their voices, the quality of their projection, very much similar to interpreting, because dubbing and interpreting are close in terms of because you have the audio being the end product. So you can assess that, quality assessment of the AVT. I would say you need to go for main journals and search for 2020, okay, 2021, and put that and search in that database, and you'll find many, literally many. And I'll be more than happy to send you only for SDH. I have found like 15 or 20 gaps that they need a lot of research, a lot. And that is only for the deaf and hard of hearing. And if you want to deal only for the deaf, or only for the hard of hearing, not the deaf, and according to the UN, they are split into 4 different groups. So, and where does the country stand, your country stand, with regards to implementing the rights for the deaf people or for the blind? Audio description, also just as important subfield in audiovisual translation. So it depends on the subfield as well. In dubbing, if you are going to, you need to be more focused, narrow down your topic first. I mean, when you said about recent areas, you need to narrow down the title of your topic. First of all, is it going to be in subtitling or in dubbing? Secondly, if it's in dubbing, are you talking about lip syncing? Are you talking about voice-overing? Are you talking about sound biting? Narration, commentary? Are you talking about documentaries that you are analyzing? Or films, feature films? Or TV series? Which ones are you analyzing in your study? So all of these are elements that are important to decide upon before you can say where to go from there with regards to that particular topic. Going to subtitling, again, not only the film itself that you choose, but how you're going to analyze that film. Based on what? Text linguistics, based on translation and culture turn, ideology and translation, because certain ideology is influencing the way you present something. Example of ideology can be, for example, IDS, Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, Israeli Defense Forces. If you are translating that into Arabic, would you say الجيش الإسرائيلي ولا قوات الدفاع الإسرائيلية? يعني if you're talking about a very hot topic at the moment. So choosing even the actual what's called decision making here for which word to go for is dictated by or controlled by because you've got outside control and inside control. Outside control is the institution itself, is the political group, is the religious group, whoever, and inside influence, which is the actual translator. The translator can actually himself or herself can actually decide on certain words to choose, whether to call them insurgents, okay, which is mutamarridin, or we call them martyrs, mustashhidin, istishhadiyin, or we call them intihariyin, suicide bombers, or whatever you want to call it. So that is really very interesting to go through the translation and politics, or subtitling and political political subtitling. So it is extremely varied, extremely difficult to give you just 1, 2, 3 examples. I'd be more than happy to send you an already file which I have on gaps for only SDH, and it is like 3, 4 pages. It is like 10 or 15 gaps there, highlighted by one of the scholars in Intralinear Journal. There are other journals that are interested, like New Voices in audiovisual, which you can go and search. The translator, you can actually, as journal, you can find out the target as a journal and see what are the latest articles written about audiovisual. Read that article And then from that, you branch out and decide what you want to do next. Because you
thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed, for this detailed answer. Now we go to Mushtaq. I think we
Thank
are
you,
running
Doctor.
out of
Can
time.
you hear
So
me?
let's try.
Yes, yes.
Yes, we
Thank
can.
you. Sorry,
yes, go ahead.
sorry for the technical problem. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Beida for giving us this opportunity to be in touch with one of the figures in the field of translation and AVT, dear Professor Khudro. Dear Professor, in your book, which is Linguistic Issues and Quality Assessment of English-Arabic Audiovisual Translation, and which is also a valuable resource in this course of our study, you have tackled the issue of semantic lexical issues, for example, the polysemy and register and other issues. My question, can we apply the practical functional approach to quality assessment that you did in the case of Pocahontas in 2016? Can we apply this translation quality assessment to the translation of pun in comic sitcoms? Thank you very much.
Now you're talking. Okay, you see, you're talking about a genre, which is humor, okay, which is, there is, actually, you can search for this. It is about dubbing. I have supervised a master's thesis in 2016, 2017 on humor, because you're talking about humor here. And humor itself is quite, you need to look at how to make humor, how to make a joke, because puns, playing on words here is the issue. And play on words is quite a very tricky topic to use, because it's very much language specific most of the time. And these are difficult to actually produce in another language. You need to go for the functional equivalence, definitely, to be able to reach the same kind of area. Now, I'll give you an example of a tongue twister, for example. I mean, if you're translating a tongue twister, she sells seashells on the seashore. Now, how would you say that in Arabic? You can't just say in Arabic, تبيع الأصداف على شاطئ البحر أو في شاطئ البحر, because there's no, if somebody said to the other guy, can you please say, she sells seashells on the seashore? It's going to be very difficult to understand your target audience. Will they understand what you're doing there? They would not. Then functional equivalence is the answer. Now, functional equivalence, of course, you can say, can you say خيط حرير على حيط خليل, for example? Or can you say خشبة خشرنفش تحمل بالسنة خشرنفشتين? And that has actually created something of a tongue twister. Of course, you don't have to use the same tongue twisters I'm using here, but that's the dynamic equivalence, which is to give the same message, okay, to your recipient. The message is a tongue twister, and you are giving that tongue twister there. A pun is also is a play on words here. You are trying to, reminds me actually what one of the master students did a thesis on Shafi'i poetry, and he plays with the word tibr or turab and tibr, which is playing on the same word, but he's reversed some of the order of the letters in the word. Now, how can you do that in another language? These are related to the embellishments of Arabic and what Abdul Rauf Hussein has done in his book, 2006, where he talked about that it is, he talked about them and how difficult it is to actually use alliteration in the same way that they are using, whether it's in Arabic and English, or from English to Arabic, or Arabic to English. يعني أيها الناس من عاش مات ومن مات فات وكل ما هو آت آت. How would you do that in the other language? Now that is to do with poetics. And these poetics remind me of Lefebvre and how in his chapter on called The Case of Missing Al-Qasida in his book in 1991, where he saw that poetics cannot be translated or was missed by the translators, and he was criticizing some of them, and he was apologetic in others, in the choice of words, in the choice of this meter and all of these stylistic elements or devices that are used. So here it's quite tricky. I would say go for an equivalent that is in the target functional equivalence that serves the same function, that makes people laugh. It reminds me actually about making people laugh with the interpreter. He was actually interpreting for the Prime Minister of Denmark, I believe. Was it Denmark or one of the Scandinavian prime ministers? And while he was interpreting for him, the Prime Minister started to speak about a joke, okay? But the interpreter, because he knows that he's focusing on the topic, so he wasn't sure what the Prime Minister is trying to say here. So he waited until he gets the gist of what's happening with this Prime Minister. What is he talking about here? It turned out that he's saying a joke, but it took him like 1 or 2 sentences for the interpreter to realize it's a joke. So what did he do? He couldn't translate the joke in the time that he's got because of the time is passing, the same way as in the audiovisual, where the time passes and you need to cover the time, you need to fill in the gap. So what he did, he says, the Prime Minister has said the joke, please laugh. And everybody laughed. Everybody laughed. So the humor is being passed on from the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister thought they understood the joke, and the audience knew that it was a joke, and the interpreter managed to do that within a short period of time. So, I mean, this kind of element of humor and comedy, like Madrasat al-Mushaghibin, subtitled, for example, which is one of the studies that one of my students actually doing, and I'm examining them, her next week. It is humor, it's difficult. Humor and puns it's got some element of humor in it. And sitcom is also, I mean, stand-up comedy is just as important. How to make a joke, the punchline, you set the situation, and then you give the punchline either at the beginning or the end. It's very, very tricky indeed. But functional equivalence will be the best one, with a humorous element if you can.
Yes, I think this is a very thorny area of translation. It's really, really much more difficult than one would think when one enters such a field. And commenting on the situation of the interpreter who told the audience that the Prime Minister said a joke, so please laugh, I think it's a risky solution. I myself wouldn't have resorted to such a solution in case I'm put in the same situation, right? Dr. Khodro, would you recommend?
Sure. No, I mean, it's not a matter of recommending that, what he's done. The idea is...
I think he was lucky enough to have a clever audience.
No, but you see, I mean, I'll give you another example of a different type, which is also another tricky situation. A Russian interpreter was interpreting, and the speaker said something about throwing the baby with the bath water, which is an expression used in English to throw the whole thing out or get rid of it completely. And she refused to even interpret that piece. You know, this is yet another element. But you need to hear it's a decision making on the spot. You need to be able to do it. I mean, it's not a matter of whether he's right or not. It's just the fact that he's trying to pass a message across. No matter what the joke was, I mean, I'm not justifying what he's done,
Yes.
but what I'm saying is it's the same situation. Now, another case is in Qatar. The Emir of Qatar was at what time, His Excellency, at the time, and it was in a press conference, and one of the people there started swearing at him in front of all these press people, and the interpreter has to say something to explain what this person is saying as a question or a comment, or what is it. So this is another element. Another element you go for, and he says, قال كلاما لا يليق بمقامك. So there is another element of George Bush when one of the guys had thrown some shoes at him, and this is gestures being done, or facial expression, or extra linguistic elements, the image contributing, and he says, "You dog," and he meant you animal. So there is quite a tricky choice of words that you need to go for to give the same effect, because the word animal and dog are quite different. Animal is more vicious than a dog in the target culture. So that's the other thing. And you can see that George Bush at the time, I think the son, he looked at the shoe and says, "It's size 10, ha ha ha." So he's laughed at it and he didn't consider it to be an insult. Yet it is an insult in the Arab culture, but not in the English culture. So you are talking about subtitling something like this. I mean, also another subtitling for Michael Jackson, I remember, and he says, "This is it." When I mean this is it, I mean this is it. So it was actually the title of his concert. It's called "This Is It," and he says, "I mean by this is it. This is the last job that I will be doing before I retire." And he actually died afterwards. But I mean, how do you translate "this is it"? Because that is also, it has two meanings to it. It has two different translations to it. So there is always a case of the implicature, explicature, because you're talking about pragmatics here, and audiovisual translation is very close to pragmatics in terms of conversation, because it's a communication act.
And this reflects the heaviness of the responsibilities put on the shoulders of translators in general and interpreters in particular, especially that most people think that it's just a matter of language, it's just a matter of mastering two languages or more. Which is not the case. Not the case in reality. Yes.
It's not the case, because Snell Hornby said that when you are translating, you are a bilingual and bicultural. You have to be. You must be. This is both of them. 1988. She said that. So bilingual and bicultural, and these are two that are for subtitlers just as much as any other translator.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Khadra. Let's now go to Abdesattar. Let's try to be brief because we have other students waiting for their turn to ask. Yes, Abdesattar, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Doctor. Many thanks to Dr. Khadra and to Dr. Beida for this chance to express the opinion. Doctor, in your book, The Linguistic Issues, also talk about a golden rule, stating that the less the better.
Yes.
In subtitling.
Yes.
I think this rule can be activated more and more if the audience we address well acquainted with the text under discussion. How can we apply this if the linguistic unit is very long and obligatory at the same time?
Yes.
And how can we make at the same time the second part of the question, of the same question, and how can one make use of the latest technology? Can one activate the latest technology in this respect? Thank you.
Okay. Now about the rule of the lesser the better, it is there are lots of mannerisms that are used in subtitling. For example, "Hey man, watch out man," I can't see you, man. Where are you, man? And sometimes this word man is referring to a woman, believe it or not. So the mannerisms can be dropped, especially as they are not needed. And also, I mean, less the better. For example, if he says, no, 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 10 times, or 5 times, 6 times, do you need to say that 5 times, 6 times? 3 will be more than enough to show that it is the same. So a repetition could be one of the elements with the reduction of the linguistic unit. Now, I'm just going to actually pause on the word linguistic unit that you mentioned here, because I think it is the unit of translation that we are talking about, deciding on what the unit of translation is. And as you know, scholars talk about the word or the phrase or the clause or the sentence or the paragraph or the page or the book or the volume. All of them are texts, and all of them can be considered as unit of translation. And it is quite a well-known term or a well-known expression used in translation studies. Now, it is obligatory, shall we say, for you to summarize, to condense, to reduce that linguistic, what you called linguistic unit, the long linguistic unit, to its bare bones, basically, to make it as easy to understand. However, it carries a lot of information in it, yet very short. This is where the skill of the subtitler comes in, and it's not easy. It's not going to come like in 1 year. This could take quite a few years for one subtitler to handle and be able to to produce such kind of short text for subtitling. Now, it is very similar to consecutive in a way, because in consecutive, you find somebody who speaks like for 1 minute, and when you are trying to say what they said, you don't speak for 1 minute. You don't give the same amount of information they have given in 1 minute. You look for the main concepts, and you try to, using your discretion as to what is minor or secondary information, and what is primary information that you need to know about. For example, an airplane crashing and killing few people, people will not be interested to know the color of that airplane or where it was heading, so much as there's a crash somewhere and people died. So there is a kind of, this is about the reduction in interpreting, which can be also used for subtitling due to the duration element, the restriction of time, and also the restriction of space, the screen. So due to these two highly, I would say, suffocating constraints, it makes you really sit down and think, how can I make this sentence shorter? How can I make it shorter, but I can make this audience understand what he's trying to say? That is the gist of, or that is the main target. That is your main objective. With regards to the latest technology, it is helpful, the latest technology, in voice recognition, in identifying when the dialogue starts, where it ends. There are lots of softwares that are being done here, and that helps a lot in time queuing, and time queuing takes time in subtitling, for example, or in knowing the duration of one sentence. How long is this? 7 seconds? I have to make sure that I can read it in 7 seconds when I translated it. When I the TT has to be 7 seconds read, to be read in 7 seconds. If it's not read in 7 seconds, I'm sorry, your dubbed version of that English, the Arabic version, is to be thrown out of the window. So technology does actually help. latest technology.
Thank you, Doctor.
Thank you. Yes, Ranin. Ranin. Ranin?
Yes, Dr. Abeda, where are you?
It's okay. I can take the if need be, Dr. Mahdi. I don't know. I mean, if you want, because I don't
Yes,
know who.
Dr. I think there is something wrong with Dr. Abeda concerning the concerning technical issues.
Ah, okay, okay. She's yes.
Especially power interruption is something frequent in Iraq.
Oh dear. I'm sorry to hear that. It's not. It's becoming like it's the norm. It's the norm. It's
out
the
of
norm.
my personal experience in simultaneous interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, I received once upon a time, I was assigned the responsibility of translating for the banking sector.
Yes.
A session in banking sector.
Yes.
When I received a 2-page briefing about the sessions that will be held, the basic terminology needed here, my task was an easy one to carry out.
Yes.
Unlike when I was assigned the responsibility of translating a political text, all of a sudden, without prior, let us say, information.
This you shouldn't accept it, yeah, Doctor. You shouldn't accept any jobs that are, you know, on the spot.
It is
you
free
cannot
of
do
charge,
that.
Doctor. It is free of charge, and I was assigned this responsibility when I was chair of the department before 10 years ago.
Mm.
So yeah. I came. I find many TV satellite channels working there in the room, and the room was full of audience. And I take the responsibility and did some sort of consecutive interpretation.
Yes.
I started to do some sort of note-taking, yes. And I was highly successful with the testimony of the people sitting there.
Yeah, yeah? Wonderful, wonderful.
So such a task, the idea I want to reach, this such a task, or whether consecutive or simultaneous interpretation, unless the interpreter is provided with, let us say, a 2-page, a 2-page briefing about the translation event, I think he, as you mentioned,
he should not accept.
Yeah, he should not accept it, or he should not involve himself. He should not involve himself in such a translation act.
Doctor, they respect you more when they know that you are not someone you can just pull by the hand and just come in and say, come and interpret for us straight away. It's not, you have a switch in your head between the two languages, but the amount of vocabulary, the amount of terminology used is extremely important. Now, there is one thing about the business.
Those children that are thinking.
Can you turn off the microphone?
Okay. I am alone in my study room.
Okay, that's fair. Now, I remember I had interpreted for in business, and it was about banking, and it was about transfer, what's called the system called SWIFT, and SWIFT is a system used in Brussels for any kind of money transfer by any country, from any country to any country, and it means transferring interbank, international. It's an expression. It's an acronym, and this acronym I had to prepare it beforehand. Do not accept. I would say to any of your students doing interpreting, do not accept any job in interpreting without going and preparing Not only the brief, and you are being very modest, Dr. Mahdi, in this. Ghazali. I wouldn't say that. I would say you need 2 to 3 days before the event to be able to interpret. You can interpret conversational kind of talk, yes, no problem. But when it comes to conference, or because this is a prepared speeches, and prepared speeches, they are usually condensed in terms of the information. If somebody's talking without a prepared script, it's very easy for you to interpret because they are speaking from the top of their heads, whatever comes to their head. But if you are doing that for a conference, it is quite demanding, and you're not supposed to do it more than 15 minutes. That's what it is. Now, in the UN, they provide you with this.
Sorry for interruption, Dr. Ahmed. Would you allow Dr. Bayda to enter the...
Yes, I don't know how I did allow her. Do I know how to do that? I will try to see if I know how to reactions. Where is it? How do you allow? Where is it? Under what chat is it? Participants, maybe. Participants. Yes. Participants. There's nobody in the waiting room. Perhaps you meant. I can't see invite. No, I can't see any way of seeing her in the waiting room. I can see only the participants.
Thank you so much, Doctor. I'll tell her.
I will try to see. I might actually find a way. 1 second. I might find a way. Security, perhaps, under security. Enable lock meeting, screen chat. She's actually, the net service has been disconnected. She's disconnected her. Enable waiting room. Yes, it's already. So she's actually disconnected.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. I am back now and trying to resume. She's trying to resume. Yes. Okay. Yes. Any other? I saw Raneen, perhaps.
No, Abdul Sattar, he has already raised a question and you have answered it.
Yes. Yes, Abdul Sattar. Oh, yes.
Yes. I raised a question. Excuse me, Professor. Then you have answered under the name and Raneen. Thanks a lot.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes. Okay, I understand. Thank you. Okay.
If no one has any question.
Mr. Isam is
Isam,
yes.
Do you have a question to raise?
Isam Muhammad. Tfadal.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Victor, for being here with us.
Thank you
for your nice presentation.
No problem.
Doctor, I have a question. This question is of 2 parts, by the way.
Sure.
It is related to the pragmatic meaning of the visual element of the audiovisual message. To which extent, Doctor, the visual element of the audiovisual message, to which extent the visual element is important to convey the intended meaning of the source text?
Yes.
And how this element affects the inference of the readership to reach the intended meaning. The second part of my question is also related to the visual element. Do you think that, Doctor, as you said, we have readership and we have different kinds of readerships according to their knowledge, according
viewership,
to
yes. Viewership, yes. Viewership, yes.
That if we do translation for audio-visual text into, for example, Arabic language, do you think that we can have 2 visual elements, one related to those people who, let us say, lay people, and one related to professional people? So we can have, can we have 2 types of visual elements of the same source text?
When you say visual elements, I mean, what do you mean by visual element?
I mean, for example, the background pictures, for example.
Yes,
so
usually you don't do that. I mean, this is what you don't change. Yeah, this the editor who does the technical side. They can edit down or edit out some visuals that are unacceptable, perhaps. They can edit them out, but you are not entitled to do that yourself. This is a kind of censorship. Now, let me just go back to visual
I'm
element.
sorry. I'm sorry. I had to go out because of the internet service. It disconnected me. Now, yes, I'm back. So forgive my absence for the last 10 minutes. Thank you.
Really appreciate it. Okay. Now, to answer your question, I mean, when you say visual element, I said that earlier about Rimael and Diaz Centers and Orero, 2007. There is an overlap between the sound, the image, and the text. These three together can actually produce the message. The message is not based on only the text itself, but more than that. An example, an exaphora, for example, if he says, here is this, if he says, here is this. Now, of course, you need to know what this is. What is he talking about? The image can show you it's a pen, okay? Or it's a lighter for a cigarette. Now he says, here is this, or here it is. If you don't see the image, you are not going to be able to know what this is. If it's masculine or feminine, gender-wise. So you need to say هذه ولا هذا. إذا كانت قلم تقول هذا، وإذا كانت قداحة أو كبريت علبة كبريت فهذه. فإذا you are linked, you are bound by the image. The image actually gives you the context in a way similar to what the drama text, the theater text does when you know where the actual scene is. So the situation where you are is extremely important. The image is extremely important to pass the message across, pragmatically perhaps sometimes. So that's the intended meaning, which can be, as I said, double entendre. If it is, it's got double meaning to it. Then the image helps in that. Now, editing it down for the layman and not for the professionals, you don't need to do that. You need, usually the companies, corporate videos or corporate productions, they tend to give you two videos. One for the specialists, the professionals, and another for the layman, the people who are the ordinary people who are watching this video. Like I am in a hospital watching, for example, on the screen, they can be advertising for teeth and how to make your teeth nice and so on, subtitled. Now this video is addressing certain group of people. So the audience, you know which audience, they tell you which audience. And you can ask the client to tell you this information. Very important information that you need to do in order to reach the intended meaning or the intended message of the audiovisual here. So it reaches the audience via 2 or 3 elements. Via the sound, because they can hear, via the image, they can see what's happening, and also via the actual words, the verbal element here that's being used. So there are 3 elements that are combined together, which help a lot in the condensation, in the reduction, in the shortening of your subtitles to make it shorter with regards to that. Viewership, as I said, you need to know that from your client to decide which text to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you very much. I think this is clear enough. And finally, we are going to the last question, yes, from Ibrahim. Ibrahim, go ahead. Let's make use of these.
Sure.
These last minutes, they are dedicated to you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Baida, for organizing this lecture. Thank you so much, Dr. Ahmed Khudro, for this remarkable lecture. In fact, I have 2 questions. My first question is, what are the most suitable strategies used in subtitling war movies from English into Arabic? And number 2, will multimodality be compromised in subtitling? And what are the answers for such problem? Thank you so much again.
Okay, thank you very much. I would like to know what you mean by modality. Are you talking about modality as in audio?
Yes. Yes.
It is audio to audio, audio to written. Is that what you mean?
Multimodality, I mean the audio, the image, and the text will be transferred into condensed mode, which is written in subtitling.
Yes. Okay. Because I mean, as you know, modality can be called for modal verbs, and modality in that one, how to translate modal verbs. That's completely different area. Yes. With regards to your question about strategies, translation strategies. Now, I need to point out to one thing before I talk about war movies. Strategies. Yeah. So sorry, because I have some interference in my. I can hear.
He's talking.
هي المحاضرة مالتها بدت دكتورة بيداء مو انتهت فقط بعد المحاضرة.
اوكي لا هذه
عفوا انا بس الاسم موجود عندي. منو حضرتك؟
اقول لك بدات المحاضرة مالتها لو ما بدت.
بدأت نحن فيها الان فيها.
اي دكتور راح حسد راح.
طيب to answer you, Ibrahim, there's two things I need to clarify first about strategies. And many students confuse strategies with procedures because they are different. Strategies are applied to text as a whole, okay, whereas procedures are localized. You are treating like when you're local treatment to a specific area on the skin. So procedures are localized, treating certain elements in the text with regards to a certain collocation or a certain term, for instance. So that is, you need to differentiate between the two. Now, strategies like foreignizing and domestication.
Yes, that's right.
Whereas procedures are related to literal translation, calc, and transcription or transference, as Catford calls it. And there is also modulation, reformulation, adaptation, equivalence, blah, blah. This is according to Vinay and Darbonet. These are procedures, but under two main strategies, according to them, which are direct translation and oblique translation. So that's, I want to actually clarify this point about strategies. So what you are saying is about the strategies with regards to the whole film. Now, this depends on, again, the patronage, who is paying you the money, basically, who is dictating you how to translate certain things in a certain way, whether they are names, whether they are expressions, and that. For example, in the night garden, which is a children's program, which is an English children's program about children when they go to bed. Now, if we translate it in the night garden, في حديقة الليل, of course, the implication of that, the overtones of it, is completely different to what it is for children. For children, it will be like they expect it. It's the time to go to bed. It's time to go to bed. That's what it means, really, but not any other adult kind of interpretation, shall we say. It was translated and dubbed as حديقة المرح. This is, I'm talking about the title. Now, حديقة المرح gives the same effect, shall we say, to my audience who are children. They know that it is for children and children is going to bed. Now, I'm not saying it's accurate or how closely accurate it is to the message itself, because you got the meaning here or you got the core intended meaning, and you have the words that go around the actual meaning, coming closer and further away from the center, okay? So, I mean, that's the problem of which word I should choose that gives me the same kind of meaning that I need. Which one is better? You know, I mean, should I choose the word park or garden? What's the difference between them? One of them is public, the other one is private. Garden is for a house, a park is for a public park. And also, if I'm choosing the word beautiful and the word pretty, pretty means the surface, and beautiful means the inside of the person. So it depends on which one I am choosing here to give the same effect or the same meaning and the same intended meaning with regards to that. So that is really the word choice to reflect that. Which one I should choose from, the word house or the word home. The word home is more emotional, more linked to your family. That's the way Palestinians would call it dar. Dar now darko, meaning your family and my family, and not actually the actual house itself. It has emotional element attached to it, the word home, to compare to the house. So you see, with regards to war movies, now if they are using the word insurgents, would you call them mutamarridin, rebels, or would you call them thawriyin or thuwar? Yani it has a different implication for the listener, the person who's watching. So if you call them rebels and they call them thuwar, then you get another person in the discussion, let's say, or in the documentary about war movie, okay, who are using the word suicide bombers and not rebels, okay? Or they're calling them insurgents, or they're calling them troublemakers, or they're talking. So it depends on their perspective, the perspective of the text producer, the ST of the original. What's their perspective? You are presenting their perspective, and it's based on that you are going to choose your wording in that. Now, as I said about الجيش الإسرائيلي وقوات الدفاع الإسرائيلية, if I am addressing those who are Jews or Israelis, they don't know الجيش الإسرائيلي. They know هذول قوات دفاع إسرائيلية. This is their perspective. But if you are presenting that perspective in an Arabic channel, then they're going to be worried about it. They will say, what do you mean قوات الدفاع الإسرائيلية? فرضاً. So you see, who is the text producer? You need to know the ideology, the agenda, the political agenda that's behind that film. Because that's a historical film, war movie, and that is presented in a certain way from a perspective, from a certain perspective. You need to keep to that perspective, unless you're going to go and domesticate it, okay? And make it gentle and break it gently to your audience, euphemistically, and Baudelarize, what's called Baudelarize, making it less offensive, shall we say, less shocking, less, you would not shock your audience to the extent they don't want to watch it anymore. This depends on the purpose of your subtitling of that film, and the purpose of the commissioner, the person who commissioned you to subtitle that film, whether it's a religious film or political film or any any group who is actually asking you to do this kind of subtitling for them. So it depends on that. In terms of modality, I forgot what you said about modality, but in modality, there's two elements in multimodality. Sometimes the film is dubbed and subtitled, okay? Multimodality. Because of that, they want you to be using one certain mode, which is subtitle written. Now here, of course, reading takes longer than speaking. for the original text and the original text, but it doesn't do so when you are dubbing it, because that's why like Turkish TV series or Mexican TV series, or now very common Korean TV series are very popular, by the way, among young people nowadays. Pop music, and they subtitle quite a lot of that, and I have actually seen of them. So it is, you are bound by certain constraints based on the modality you go for. If you go for the modality of dubbing, that means you have to produce it audio text, which means you have to تشكيل it, تحط عليه diacritics, تشكيل بدك تجهزه بحيث انه يكون duration wise fits well within the limit of the duration of that particular sentence, whether the individual is facing the camera or his back to the camera plays a part in the dubbing part. So all of these will play into the duration of recording that piece in audio, because you are producing it all audio. If it is a mixed one, shall we say, subtitled and audio, they tell you. Now, a good example for this is Dora. In Dora, which is called Fulla in Arabic, believe it or not, you see they've changed the name. They have actually the subtitles, the commissioner, the person who commissioned your work, they've actually told you what the names of the characters are, because they are addressing children. So Fulla ولا إقلبقو اللي هي in the night garden, مترجمة سيد نظيف. All of these names have changed based on a strategy that is based on a strategy dictated, okay? The one who has the power. Who's got the power? The control factor, the outside control factor, the political group, the religious group, the institution, if it's an institution that you are subtitling for. So it depends on them telling you what are the guidelines. Their guidelines you need to follow. In terms of duration, they tell you, for example, 6 seconds per subtitle. You cannot go further than that. So you need to segment, as we call it in interpreting, segmentation. We need to break down, segment the actual text accordingly to make each subtitle stand alone on its own without having to be linked in one way or another to the next constituent, which is another verbal phrase or noun phrase or adjectival or adjective phrase, adverbial phrase. You don't break phrases. And that is your job for not breaking, because you can't go back and forth in one subtitle to the next, unless you've got a DVD copy and you are going back and forth to do that. So you don't have them linked together in too closely to the extent that you can't remember what's been said in the previous subtitle. So each subtitle needs to stand alone. So there are elements of technical elements, so shall we say, or guidelines. They are given by the company itself to tell you that. The strategies themselves, they decide sometimes to tell you. مثلا أنا أعطيك مثال، في بعض الإديتورز بيقول لك إنه ما تستخدم جهنم يعني بحق جهنم مثلا، بيقول لك لا هذه religious ما تدخلها، وجنة يعني مثلا ما فيك تقول you can't say هذا المكان هو جنة على الأرض، بيقول لك يا أخي جنة هذه كلمة دينية شيلها من هنا. فيعني they become too narrow-minded in terms of the selection of the actual word choice, you know, decision-making, as Dr. Abeida was saying earlier. So they interfere in things like بقول لك ما تقول نار، لا جنة ولا نار في الكلام هذا، لأن هذا كلام موجود في القرآن. لكن في كلمات ثانية كثير موجودة في القرآن ومستخدمة. يعني what is this? Also, يعني what kind of what kind of نرجع لكمان يعني for the other guy who says one of you has said about research, recent research, you can do research about dialects. How do you translate dialects from let's say Scandinavian, from Scottish to Irish to Canadian to Australian in the same film? When you translate them into Arabic, how would you do that? Would you go for Lebanese, Iraqi, Gulf, Egyptian, Moroccan, Tunisian, Saudi? Which one you're going to go for to choose to which dialect? So there are lots of things that are worth investigating, and they are all interesting. For a PhD, they are all interesting. They are all important. Multilingualism, modality, as you said, multimodality, strategies, which strategy, and is it effective? How effective is this strategy? And foreignizing, if you are foreignizing, is it going to have that kind of shocking element, especially if there is no marginality? Foreignizing with marginality, it has to be giving footnotes, giving some sort of paratext to add to the text. One of my students is saying in the master's, he says that we have to add enriched text, which is like a hyperlink put in on the same shot. You press on it, it gives you more information about this particular scene of symbolism, where there is a symbol talking about the symbolism in politics, for example, the symbol of having a statue, for example, of somebody. That's a symbol. What does it mean? A communist or a fascist or socialist signs or symbols, and what they mean, and so on. So choosing them according to the symbolism used in the film. So it is quite interesting, multimodality, but which ones to go for? Would you go for multimodality to multimodality? Or would you go for multimodality to monomodality? This is a choice that is, you have to suggest to the person who gave you the job in order to enlighten them as to which modality I should go for. Now, in terms of strategy, which strategy you go for, this is your decision. But at the same time, you need to be aware of my audience. Who is going to watch this film? I have received a film about a factory in Lebanon advertising for some sort of a product, okay? And it's about water or something. And it is to be broadcasted in Jordan. So I need to know that. Another, I mean, it depends who is my audience. And, sometimes they ask you to put it in Iraqi dialect, to translate it in Iraqi dialect. على دلعونا وعلى دلعونا, for example. They want you to put it in Lebanese song dialect. So this is another thing about the language, which language to use in the multilingualism there. And the biculturalism you need to be aware of to understand very well and to be able to follow that in the strategies of war movies. Depends which war are you talking about as well. And which side are you on? Are you going to be not taking any sides, which is you are supposed to, but then maybe there is, who has commissioned you? Is it the foreign ministry of Japan, for example? That's why you are, or, because each war movie will be given from a certain perspective. And you need to discuss that with your commission, or the person who commissioned you, not the publisher, but the company who has paying you the money. But not only that, the ideology component, the economic component, the status component. يعني ممكن يجي واحد يكون وزير يقول لك خذ ترجم هذه. لأن إذا بترجمها مو على كيفه ما راح يعطيك فلوس. So there is the status component, which is control factor, according to Lefebvre. Economic factor, مين حيدفع. Status factor, if he's a very important person, it plays a part. Economic factor, ideological factor as well, component. read له further. It's very interesting to consider for patronage and whether these factors are interlinked. أحيانا ما يكون نفس الفاكتور مع الكلاينت نفسه، يعني الكلاينت نفسه هو ستيتس عنده منصب، وايكونوميك هو اللي يدفع، وايديولوجيكال هو اللي بيفرض عليك منتاليتي معينه تفكر فيها وتبرزها في الترجمه تبعيتك وتعمل suppression to any other kind of thing, and that is domestication par excellence.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed. I think that if we let ourselves be carried away in this enjoyable and very interesting discussion, we wouldn't finish before midnight. And we would like...
Would you mind allowing me to talk for 2 seconds?
Sure.
Yes, yes, for sure. And just, I want to say, before concluding that,
Dr. Mahdi, are you using this status component here?
It's yes.
No, I don't mean it in that. I don't mean it in that way. I don't mean it in that way.
At the end of this,
it's all right. It's all right.
Yes. At the end of this nice presentation for this highly informative lecture on interpretation and audiovisual translation, I want to express my deep gratitude for Dr. Ahmed Khudro for the acceptance of the invitation and for presenting this lecture, which has enriched me personally, enriched me a great deal. I repeat my gratitude and deep thanks for your, let us say, person. Thanks.
I'm so honored, and I don't
Thank
know.
you,
I'm lost for words.
Most welcome. Honored to have you with us, Dr. Mahdi, in this session. And I would like also to, and I'm really being optimistic about this. I don't think it's a far away that one day we can host Dr. Ahmed on site in our university live. We will sure invite you after the end of the pandemic in one of our academic events, and I'm sure you wouldn't hesitate to come over to Baghdad. You are most welcome. We'll meet you live. We'll host you for a number of days, for lectures, for a conference, or whatever that is suitable for you. And we are still saving more and more for more discussions. And we hope, and I'm sure you are generous enough not to reject our future invitations.
No problem.
Thank you.
Anytime. And I'd like to thank all the students who have been asking. And then also, I mean, I would recommend for the students to read more about audiovisual from other languages and how they are being transferred, because it doesn't have to stop at Arabic. And you can always follow the model, whatever the model they have used. And there are hundreds of models in the translation studies. I would like to wish you all the best for all these PhD students. And I will be more than happy to, guide, if need be, them in their research projects, if they would like to. I'd be more than happy. I don't mind. I'd be honored to have that. And I would like to thank also Dr. Mahdi al-Ghazali and any other doctors who are here. I don't know if there are. Of course, I will definitely thank Dr. Baida for this invite. Very surprised, I'm pleasantly surprised to have heard from you, Dr. Baida. And of course, we are always in touch, and we have been for some time, and it's a pleasure. It gives me great pleasure to be with you and to be with Dr. Mahdi and with all the other PhD students, and I wish them the very, very best. And they are very promising candidates. I can tell that from their questions.
Most welcome. Most welcome.
Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you for attending and for making this session very successful. I wish you to enjoy the rest of the evening and the night. Goodbye, and see you in our next event. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Doctor.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Goodbye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doctor. Goodbye.
Thank you. Most welcome. Most welcome.